Hi, John Herman here. Today I'm going to continue examining some of the more common Christmas traditions we're familiar with and try to explain where they came from. Hopefully some of you learned a few things about some of them last week. Let's start out with a tradition known as Boxing Day. You may not be familiar with this one, but if you ever see a reference to it, you'll know what it means. Boxing Day is celebrated on the second day of Christmas, which commemorates Saint Stephen, who was the first Christian martyr. The day is mainly observed by those in the UK and countries that were once part of the British Empire, including Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The holiday began in the UK about 800 years ago, when at Christmas time, the alms boxes at the churches were opened and the contents given to the poor. It was also traditional that servants got that day off to celebrate Christmas with their families. They would also be given boxes, in other words, presents, by their masters. This tradition became known as Boxing Day. Over the years, it has morphed into the equivalent of our Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year. All right, let's talk about the colors of Christmas. Green seems to be the predominant color of Christmas. Evergreen plants like holly, ivy, and mistletoe have been used for thousands of years to decorate and brighten up buildings during the long, dark winter. These plants also reminded people that spring would soon come and that winter wouldn't last forever. Since these evergreens did not die during the winter, they became associated with life. In addition to that association with green at that time of the year, many parts of Europe during the Middle Ages held what were known as paradise plays. These plays were often performed on Christmas Eve, and they portrayed Bible stories to people who couldn't read. In these plays, the paradise tree in the Garden of Eden was normally a central prop, and it was usually a pine tree with red apples tied to it. This, of course, added to the association of green with Christmas. What about red? The early use of red was associated with the apples of the paradise tree. They signified the fall of Adam. Red is also the color of holly berries, which is said to represent the blood of Jesus when he died on the cross. Red is also the color of bishops' robes, which would have been worn by Saint Nicholas. Red ultimately became the color of Santa's uniform. What about gold? Gold was one of the presents brought to the baby Jesus by one of the wise men, and traditionally its color is used to depict the star that the wise men followed. White. White is often associated with purity and peace in Western cultures. White paper wafers were sometimes used to decorate paradise trees. The wafers represented the bread which is eaten during communion. Now what about blue? The color blue is often associated with Mary, the mother of Jesus. In medieval times, blue dye and paint were actually more expensive than gold. Therefore, blue would only be worn by royal families and very rich people. Mary was often painted wearing blue to show her importance. All right, what about mistletoe? Mistletoe is a plant that grows on a range of trees, including willow, apple, and oak trees. It's actually a parasite that attaches itself to the branch of a host tree, after which it begins to grow outward. It is spread by the ingestion of its seeds by birds, who would then defecate on the branches of other trees. In fact, the word mistletoe comes from the Anglo-Saxon word mistul, meaning dung, and tan, meaning stick. In other words, it's a poop stick. That doesn't sound very romantic, does it? The seeds attach themselves to the new host, and a plant now begins. The tradition of hanging it in the house goes back to the times of the ancient Druids. Mistletoe was supposed to possess mystical powers, which brought good luck to the household and warded off evil spirits. It was also used as a sign of love and friendship in Norse mythology, and that's where the custom of kissing under the mistletoe came from. The custom of kissing continued among servants in the late 18th century in England. The tradition dictated that a man was allowed to kiss any woman standing underneath the mistletoe, and that bad luck would befall any woman who refused the kiss. One variation on the tradition stated that with each kiss, a berry was to be plucked from the mistletoe, and the kissing must stop after all the berries had been removed. In Scandinavia, mistletoe is considered a plant of peace, under which enemies could declare a truce, or warring spouses could kiss and make up. What about candy canes? The origin of the candy cane is not known for sure. There are many legends and stories, but none of them are known to be true. One that keeps reappearing, though, is the story that dates back to 1670. It tells of a choir master in Cologne, Germany, who wanted to keep the children quiet during the live nativity tradition on Christmas Eve. He decided to feed them, and what he came up with was to ask a local candy maker to make some sugar sticks. In order to justify giving candy to the children during a worship service, he had a crook added to remind the children of the shepherds who first visited Jesus. In addition, he used the white color of the curved sticks to teach children about the Christian belief in the sinless life of Jesus. From Germany, candy canes spread to other parts of Europe, where they were handed out during plays that reenacted the Nativity. As a result, according to this legend, the candy cane became associated with Christmas. Sometimes other Christian meanings are given to parts of the canes. For example, the J shape can also mean Jesus. The white of the cane can represent the purity of Jesus Christ, and the red stripes, of course, represent the blood he shed when he died on the cross. The peppermint flavor can represent the hyssop plant, which was used for purification in biblical times. One part of the cane's past that is known is the fact that around 1920, a man by the name of Bob McCormick from Georgia started making candy canes for his friends and family. They became more and more popular, and he started his own business called Bob's Candies. Bob's brother-in-law, who was a Catholic priest who had worked in a candy factory while growing up, invented a machine that automatically twisted the candy sticks, cut them to length, and put in the crook. This was a huge benefit, since before that, the canes had to be manually bent, which resulted in about 20% breakage. All right, what about Christmas poinsettias? Poinsettia plants are native to tropical forests of Central America, especially in an area of southern Mexico, where they flower during the winter. They grow in the wild as bushes or small trees. Their English name comes from a man named Joel Roberts Poinsett. He was a physician, a botanist, and the first United States ambassador to Mexico. While he was visiting Mexico in 1825, he was introduced to the plants and was so impressed by them that he had some shipped back to his home in South Carolina, where he began to grow them. They were eventually named after him, at least in America. The plant's association with Christmas began back in the 16th century Mexico, where again there's a legend that tells of a girl named Pepita. She was too poor to provide a gift for the celebration of Jesus' birthday, but was inspired by an angel in one version of the legend, or her cousin in another, to gather some weeds from the roadside and place them in front of the church altar. Crimson blossoms sprouted from the weeds she had placed there, and everyone who saw them was sure that they had seen a miracle. From that day on, the bright red flowers were known as flowers of the Holy Night. During the 17th century, Franciscan friars in Mexico began to include the plants in their Christmas celebrations. The star-shaped leaf pattern was said to symbolize the Star of Bethlehem, and the red color represented the blood sacrifice through the crucifixion of Jesus. Now, that part is a legend, what I just told you. But what we do know is that a German immigrant to the United States named Albert Eck began to grow and sell these plants around 1900. His son and grandson continued to experiment with grafting techniques and were successful in producing the plant we are now familiar with. It's interesting to note that if these plants are left to grow naturally, they kind of resemble more of a weed than anything else. The poinsettia Christmas connection was vastly enhanced due to the marketing efforts of Albert's grandson, Paul. He gave for free many plants to TV stations so that they could display them on various shows during the Christmas season. Paul himself even appeared on The Tonight Show and Bob Hope's Christmas special to promote the plants. His efforts were a huge success for his company and succeeded in pairing poinsettias with Christmas. Now, there's an interesting fact about poinsettias. The colored leaves, which are called bracts, require 12 hours of continuous total darkness and then abundant light for the remaining daytime hours for at least 5 days in a row in order to develop the brilliant color. Even a small amount of light at night, such as from a passing car or a light leaking under a door, will spoil the color. All right, what about Christmas cards? The custom of sending Christmas cards was started in 1843 by Sir Henry Cole of England. He had helped to set up the post office there several years earlier and wondered how to encourage ordinary people to use the new service. He and an artist friend came up with the idea of printing a card with a picture on it that was appropriate for the Christmas season. This was intended to serve as a way for people to greet each other and to introduce the new postal system. The note was in the form of a postcard and therefore needed no envelope. The original picture showed 3 generations of a family raising a toast to the card's recipient. On either side of the family scene were scenes of charity, depicted by images showing food and clothing being given to the poor. Some people objected to the family picture because it showed a mother giving her child a sip of wine. The first year, over 2,000 cards were printed and sold. The early cards rarely showed snow because it reminded the people of the cold winter months. Rather, scenes of flowers and spring images were used, as well as nativity scenes. Now, in 1873, a lithographer by the name of Louis Prang began selling Christmas cards in America. The first ones were simply pictures of flowers, animals, and nature scenes with the words, "Merry Christmas." In just over 10 years, his company was had printed 5 million cards each year. In 1910, John C. Hall and two of his brothers created the Hallmark Card Company. In 1915, they published their first Christmas card and changed the format of greeting cards to a size of 4 inches by 6 inches, folded in half. They had discovered that postcards did not have quite enough room to write an average note, but on the other hand, people didn't want to write an entire letter either. Soon they were contracting with well-known artists such as Norman Rockwell, Grandma Moses, and Salvador Dali to create Christmas art. In 1963, even Jackie Kennedy produced 2 Christmas illustrations for them. Hallmark, of course, is still one of the largest card makers in the business. The first known personalized Christmas card was sent in 1891 by Annie Oakley, the famous sharpshooter and star of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. She happened to be in Glasgow, Scotland during the Christmas of 1891, and she sent cards back to her friends and family in America, which featured photos of herself on them. Now, what about snow and ice, which is now associated with Christmas? The Bible doesn't mention snow during the time of Jesus' birth, but it does snow in Israel during the winter. Jesus very easily could have seen snow during his lifetime. The association of snow with Christmas began during the Victorian period. Between 1550 and 1850, there was a mini ice age in Britain. During this time, winter fairs were often held on a frozen Thames River. One of the main reasons that Victorians put snow and Christmas together was a book called A Christmas Carol, written in 1843 by Charles Dickens. We all know the story of Scrooge. When Dickens was a child, Britain experienced very heavy snowfalls around Christmas time. So when he wrote A Christmas Carol, he put lots of snow and ice in it. He also featured snow during the Christmas season in some of his other books, including the Pickwick Papers. Now, Dickens's books were and still are very popular, so when the Victorians read the books, they equated snow with Christmas. Another connection between snow and Christmas was suggested by the song I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, written by Irving Berlin. It was first recorded in 1942 by Bing Crosby and had come from a film called Holiday Inn, which was set in the snowy countryside of Vermont in the month of December. In fact, there's a 75% chance of it snowing on Christmas Day in Vermont. As a point of interest, up until 1997, Bing Crosby's recording of White Christmas was the top-selling single of all time. Over 130 million copies of that tune, sung by Crosby and other artists, have been sold. No wonder snow and Christmas go together in people's minds. Well, this seems like a good place to stop. I haven't decided yet about next week's lesson, but I may look into the background of a few Christmas carols if it appears to look interesting. Have a good week.